The worst horror movie I ever saw was fucking great.
Hello and welcome to This May Hurt a Bit. My name is James Strayer and this is...
John C. Myers.
And we are a horror franchise podcast discussing each film in popular and not so popular franchises. And today we're discussing The Omen from 1976. 2006. So we're watching another remake that came out, what, is that 30 years? 30 years
that's
after.
30 years.
And my goodness, I want to talk about why this one sucks as compared to as why we thought Psycho was interesting in a weird way.
Yes.
Just like, I don't know why. This is a in-process thought that I'm having right now. So we don't have to jump into it right away, but let's think about that. Why does this one kind of be crappy? So
it's similar to Psycho in that it uses like the fact that Psycho was like a shot-for-shot remake, basically, of the original one. This uses the original script.
That's my favorite thing about this.
We talked about in the original one how Richard Donner made all these changes to it for the final product, and this kind of shows, this is a good vehicle to show you, man, Richard Donner's a good and smart director.
Yes, he knows what to include, what to exclude, what to rewrite. Yeah,
and so like on its own, overall, it's unnecessary. Well, you can just put that out there. But on its own, though, like it's not bad necessarily, but it's just you can't help but compare it to the original, particularly, in this format of a podcast.
Right.
But like knowing what the original is versus what this is, it's like, oh, this is like an airport or, a grocery store checkout lane novelization of the movie. Right. Is what it kind of feels like.
Yeah. I just happened to check our Instagram, which I don't do very often, I admit, right before we hit record, and Chumps was on there and he posted just like, well, this was a waste of time. And I was like, yeah, kind of. Like I kind of agree with you. It's so lifeless that I was thinking to myself while watching it, like, this could be like a 35-minute podcast, and that's about it, really. Because I know our format is to go scene by scene, and sometimes I feel like that's not the best way to do it, but whatever. And I'm just like, I don't know how that's useful this time. Not to throw a wrench in it, but like you could just like replay from a couple months ago.
The problem is that you have a director, John Moore, who also did A Good Day to Die Hard and Max Payne and Flight of the Phoenix.
Goodness.
So here's this guy that's got shiny action behind him, and bringing that kind of like the looks he has to this format, I don't think works well. And I don't think there's anything against stylish horror. Obviously, I enjoy Mandy, for example. Right. But like so much of this movie is about a regular world falling apart because of this thing. And these people exist in these spaces that are not real at all, that are not like what office looks like that. Why is his psychiatrist's office?
I love that office.
It's amazing looking, but it just doesn't feel like
fit.
a place someone would be, actually. It's just all like super overlit or whatever. And that stylization takes away from the personalness of the horror. And so I think makes it, as a result, less scary. Right off the bat, going that like, all right, we know there's no mystery here. This is well set up that this is going to be the devil's son, that this is bad stuff. So you can't really expect that same level of mystery. But that being said, without that mystery, it's not that interesting. It lacks a little something, because you're just like, you're watching the characters figure it out, what you already know. And it's a little bit more fun to follow along with them, and you're still not entirely sure. So some of these moments that they're having, you're like, yeah, no, he's the devil though. Like this is all bad.
Right.
Particularly because they include him in certain scenes, like the hospital scene.
Yes.
With Mia Farrow. That's rather than just being like this stuff around him. So I don't know.
The most important thing about this film is that it was released June 6, 2006.
Yes.
Like that is by far and away. That's why it got made. That's why everything happened. Do you remember where you were on June 6, 2006? Because I do.
Wait, you know where I was?
Yes. I mean, I thought it was so funny that we were coming up on that date, of course. And at the time, I was working for a small record label here in Portland, Oregon called Soleil Moon Recordings. Label and distribution, Greg Gallant, if you're listening, I know you follow us on Instagram. Hi there.
Hi, Greg.
My old coworker. Love that guy. We had a sale. It was music that was like kind of esoteric, dark ambient noise, like creepy music, dark folk music and stuff like that. Everything but metal, basically, in that kind of stylized genre. But we had a sale that day. There was like 20% off if you called on June 6, 2006, and you said Hail Satan on the phone. And we just got all these people calling up and saying Hail Satan. And I said, you can have another 5% off if you say it in a demon voice. And so like I had all of our customers calling up and saying it in a demon voice. And it was funny. And it was just for us. But anyway, I just remember that so clearly. And I was just like, oh yeah, there's an Omen remake coming out today. And like none of us in the office like cared about it or anything. And it's been years and I finally watched it because of this.
Yeah, I was probably working. I was either at my office working late or drunk.
Yeah. Sounds
26
about right.
years old. Yeah.
I mean, 26 years old in Portland. Yeah, for sure.
That's what you're doing when because you could afford it at that time.
Right. But the funny thing is just like I looked this up and when this was greenlit was July 2005. It went into theaters June 6, 2006. 11 months. That is lightning fast for a movie. Like, I think they
of this caliber of like, yeah. Size. I mean, because we've certainly seen a lot quicker, but for this giant, big, seemingly worldwide production.
Yeah, I can't imagine like working on this and just feeling like, oh, I got to hit that date. Like, my goodness. So, yeah, where to begin? I mean, it seems a fool's errand to go scene by scene because I wonder if we have a proper terminology or phrasing for this kind of movie where it's not quite shot for shot. It's not quite Psycho level, which was very specifically shot for shot. But this is the same script practically to the point where the writer who did the remake for this was not allowed a credit. The WGA said, like, this is way too similar. You don't get a writing credit on this.
The closest thing I can think of is you're more of music guys. You can probably think of some examples of this. When someone does a cover of a song and it's just a cover, you know what I mean? Like there's nothing added to it.
That's
you know
my least favorite kind of cover.
Yeah. You think of Nirvana's Man Who Sold the World versus the original Man Who Sold the World or other things like that. And then you hear some that are like, oh yeah, this is just the same song. You just are singing it as a woman, you know, whatever. Like it's no different.
Yeah.
And that's what this kind of feels like. There's really kind of like you just did this with like higher production value.
Right.
Is basically, and it doesn't feel that much different.
Yeah. I was always a big fan of Dinosaur Jr.'s Big Fuzzy cover of Just Like Heaven. Because like, how do you improve on Just Like Heaven? It's like the greatest pop song ever, practically. And then you add the Big Fuzzy Dinosaur Jr. to it. Nobody's doing that with the Omen remake, except for a couple of like dream sequences or something.
Ooh, yeah,
much
which I did not
like the Psycho remake, which was so bizarre.
Yes, yeah, that there are these weird added like arty things. Yeah, and those felt really forced in there, and you know, so that could be the studio being like, this isn't scary enough. Kids today want jump scares. Because this is 2006. Saw is still a big deal.
Right.
You know, we're still making those kind of movies. And there's a lot of like 2006-ish feel to something. Like the opening credits are very much like, yeah, I've seen 7.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I thought of 7 and Saw during those opening credits.
Like the approach to the church has a much more Saw feel with like quick cuts, you know, like flashes of other stuff that really take away from that moment. Again, like doesn't have the mystery of like what's going on with this kid. It's trying to give it to you from like his point of view, which is strange at that moment because you know he's the devil. So like, why would you want the audience to empathize? This is why he's freaking out,
right?
Rather than have it be like the hero, so to speak. You be forced to deal with it. And they just, the focus on sometimes like the stylization of stuff takes the focus away from the horror that is happening. Like when the nanny kills herself, and it's all for you, Damien. They have her jump off the building and she whams against the side of the house rather than go through a window. Yeah. But then her shoe falls off. For shot from underneath, the shoe falls off, falls down and into the punch, breaks this punch bowl, and then people start freaking out. When you end with a shot of the punch bowl getting destroyed, the problem becomes no more punch. The reason she killed herself is that there's no more punch.
Or there's a shoe in the punch.
Yeah. Like
I'm not drinking shoe punch.
It took away from that, like the horror of this person. Like then when she shatters through the window, because I don't, it seemed like that wasn't planned in the suicide or whatever in the original. But this just like added this needless, like, oh, wouldn't that be cool if this had, if we could make it seem like the Guns N' Roses November Rain video?
I mean, that's my favorite Guns N' Roses video.
Well, it's everyone's favorite Guns N' Roses video. No, I don't want that in my Omen movie.
Yeah. I mean, I have a feeling that it was a director's choice, the punch bowl thing, to then mirror the Pope spilling his wine in the very end in slow motion. So we have red wine and punch getting poured like blood or something. Like, it's just like, man, that's pretty ham-fisted, guys.
It's
like,
very ham-fisted.
And here's the other problem with this is like, again, the Omen is a classy movie. Like it's serious, it's thoughtful. I'm not going to call it an art film, but like it does have a different kind of caliber than other stuff that we watch here. And so like when you're going for these ham-fisted updates on it, it feels so much lesser.
Well, I think it's because you're trying to be serious as well. If you just went much more camp with it, I don't necessarily mean like
Omen 3.
But just something a little bit because it still wants to have that the Omen has. Yeah. But it still has like, it kind of camps up a lot of stuff. Like at the beginning we have, instead of being this mysterious, like, hey, we got a free baby, you see as the book opens as well, like you see here's the people noticing the stars aligning. There's a holy PowerPoint presentation to the Pope. And
I loved that. Like, I thought it was stupid, but I laughed because
I absolutely laughed
because they were just trying to draw all these stupid current events into prophecy, which is like what conspiracy theorists do. This is so modern that we had 9/11 in there. Mm-hmm. We had the Columbia explosion, which, as an avid NASA fan, like I was like, I don't want to see that. Yeah. But there were like 6 trumpets blown or something like that they were going over. And I do love the idea of John and I work in advertising and video production and that kind of stuff. And we've had to do presentations for clients and stuff. Can you imagine being the guy who had to put together that presentation for the Pope? Like, I mean, just like going in there, like, you talk. No, you talk. No, you talk. Like,
and then just like, I didn't change the transitions between the slides. This is all page peel. Like this isn't loading correctly. Hold on. I got to stop this presentation to tech support. It's just, again, like it's that. I know it's something everyone does, but there's something about taking the holy and making it profane that seems more of part 3, where it's just like, yes, these prophecies that we'll show you in a PowerPoint presentation is just a straight bummer, man. Yeah. Like I don't want to think about like being in a meeting with the Pope, but so they do that. And it's way more ominous. Liev Schreiber is at the orphanage, whatever, talking to the priest. It's lit so much more drastically and it makes it seem so much more conspiratorial. It's like, you got to take that baby, man. Come on. Versus the like, hey, this could actually work out. I don't know.
There was one moment in that scene that I perked up at, and I'm so bad at remembering our own conversations that, maybe you'll just have to remind me, but like...
Yeah, I don't listen to you either. Fine.
Yeah. the priest says something to the effect of, God will forgive us this one trespass for the sake of this baby's life. Mm-hmm. Did they do that in the first movie? Because I thought that was at least a little bit of a like, I'm trying to justify things here.
I don't remember, but there was the whole like, why worry about the dead? Like, focus the love on the living.
Right. Yes. Which I do remember that. Okay. So Liev Schreiber, he's no Gregory Peck, but I'm going to say that while this is a needless movie, the performances are pretty solid.
Yes.
I think that they're fine. They're maybe even better than fine. Yeah, I don't know Liev Schreiber from anything, and I just thought that he was perfectly good in this role. He was severe enough, and he actually, like, I don't know, he showed his chops.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit more interplay between the couple when they go to London to be ambassadors or whatever. There's a little bit more like butting heads about this change in their life. And again, like I thought Julia Stiles was fine. No beef with Julia Stiles.
Yeah.
She would make a good, like looking at her face when she was hanging off the balcony, she would make a good young Kai Wynn if you did like a DS9 prequel.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
No, I thought she was fine. And yeah, like it's a thing where you can't be like, well, he's no Gregory Peck because who is? Right. I would like some like ASMR of him speaking Italian.
Oh, era vecchio di mattone. Me lo ricordo bene.
It's the right address. Può essere per l'incendio molti anni fa.
Cosa è successo?
Because when they're talking to the hospital, he's like, that was just like, I'm going to go to bed now.
Not bad. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I enjoyed him in this, and he's a little staid in some places when they encounter the gravesite. I think that's when you really start to see Gregory Peck like fall apart and with the deaths, whatever. And I don't think the movie couldn't let him do that. It was too much of everything kind of under glass in a lot of it that it would have felt weird if he did. But I still kind of would have liked to have seen it.
Julia Stiles does go for I think my child is evil quickly in this movie. I feel like it happened quicker in this movie, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing necessarily, but like there's something about taking your kid to the zoo and watching a bunch of monkeys like kind of get like a little bit mad. Well, okay, and then the gorilla pounded on the glass, but that's a little bit different than driving a car through a safari and getting attacked. Also, there's something to, and I want to be careful about just being constantly old man who likes older movies a little bit better, but there's something about the idea of actual 30 baboons rushing your car, which is way scarier than a couple of kind of cute monkeys like screaming at you. Yeah. And then one kind of CGI looking gorilla like pounding the glass. Like,
it doesn't have the same feeling.
I felt those baboons rushing the car in a different way than this particular scene.
Because at no point during the baboon scene do they actually like break windows and stuff like that, but it felt more immediate. And some of that was how it was put together too. Because this wants to try to do the slow burn. It doesn't really do that well. So when the horror stuff happens, like some of the kills are still like outlandish and ridiculous. Yeah. But something I started to pick up in this scene, I've been noticing it, really picked it up in that monkey scene, is the real star of this movie is the color blue. Because they go nuts with that. And I started to think about like, oh, okay, putting on my Jolene hat and thinking about from our part 2 episode, you should listen to that one. And I thought, okay, well, are they going to like put him in blue because like way back when blue was more associated with Satan and he's just trying to be cheeky about it? No, just everything's blue. All the children are blue. You know how there's they
have uniforms on or something like
uniforms
that.
On. Blue. England, blue tinted. Italy, blue tinted. Jerusalem, blue tinted. He doesn't do the like, oh, are you in the desert? Time for orange tint. No, it's just everything is blue. Right. And everything's just very cold and distant. And I don't think that works for this.
2000 photography, or, my favorite old timey production technique, which is blue for night, as they say. Yeah. and I totally got the blue for night in the Israel section. Yes. Full on. I was just like, you guys had this location from 2 to 5 o'clock and you had to make it look like nighttime, didn't you? Like, I get
love their hotel room in Israel when David Thewlis, who shows up as Jennings, is the
not David Warner.
The not David Warner. Not a single neckerchief in this movie, by the way. That should have been the fucking headline. But when he comes in and sits in the bed, his bed is so far away from Liev Schreiber's bed. It's like, could we have the not gayest room possible? I don't want anyone thinking that we could possibly be gay.
Right. I mean, David Thewlis probably didn't think that, but like Liev Schreiber probably thought that. Like,
no, but it was just so like that. It's such a huge room. And like the way they represented, this is what I was going to say earlier, the way they represented Italy. So they added a beat where Liev Schreiber gets the job of ambassador because he was originally working for this other ambassador, and that ambassador dies in a Final Destination style death that involves Rome basically being this tiny Italian village. It's these two men on this cobblestone road and this horrible truck up on blocks or something. The block gets knocked out, and so the truck rolls backwards, spills gasoline into everything, and starts on fire.
He gets clear and present endangered.
He totally gets clear and present endangered. They cut out Harrison Ford like jumping away from it.
Yeah.
But like, I just love that. It's like, Italy, like a major metropolitan area. No, it's still just like, hey, what's the matter you face? So why are you in Italy? It was just kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. That scene, like whenever there's a whole bunch of cars that like stop people in a traffic jam and line up just to like pin someone in, I just think of 1996 and me watching Clear and Present Danger.
Speaking about the look of the whole thing as well.
Yeah.
That kid has the drabbest bedroom I've ever seen. I mean, like, it's not like in the original one that Damien had this like really child's bedroom. It's still kind of drab, but it seemed more fitting with everything else. This, he's just got, it's glum. The wallpaper is, I guess, supposed to look like 666 or something, but it just it looks like a grandma's bedroom. It's
that and like, so I wondered if they were going for like an austere look, because
Yeah.
I know that estate that they moved to, like it starts off really austere because they've got like the blankets over the artwork and that kind of stuff. But I love it when they step outside on the balcony and they look back and everything's super gothic architecture, and I'm like, that's amazing.
That's
but
really
all
cool.
the interiors are so drab and boring. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't know if it's a dream sequence. I can't remember. When Julia Stiles is like brushing her teeth, I was just like, oh, this is a bathroom by Stanley Kubrick. Like all white, and she's in a red robe. It might have been a dream sequence, so maybe that's like an acceptable jump. But you're right. It's just
needless, you know?
Right. But at the same time, I see this a lot where like the super rich have no style at all.
Oh, sure.
They are so drab and boring, and everything is so clean. If I was super wealthy, I'd have a hobbit hole. Like it'd be warm and cozy and kind of awesome to be in. But these people are terrible. They've got terrible taste.
Well, when I was thinking about that, watching this one versus the styles and whatever of both 1 and 2, and a lot of like wood paneling and warmth and stuff like that. And I was like, I kind of miss that. Not that I'm ever hanging around with a bunch of rich people, but it's just like, that seems like a place you would want to be rather than these really cold, minimalist spaces. But that's just an aesthetics thing, I suppose.
I mean, sometimes I think that looks neat, but I don't want that for my home. Like, I want coziness so much, you know? How do you relax on the couch with a blanket with this kind of austere look? You stay up and be anxious about making money. Maybe that's it.
You're not relaxing. You are making money moves. And I don't know. Like, so a lot of this kind of goes to what I was saying earlier about just like everything seemed this weird minimalistic or very stylized in this way that it doesn't seem like a place where actual people are operating.
Right.
And I think that can work in a movie, but I think for the kind of movie or the kind of story the Omen is, it doesn't serve it very well.
So let's get into what we thought of Damien. I mean, I don't know. There's no wondering if he's the devil's child like in the first movie. I'm sure there's a better way to say that. This kid is so creepy looking. I already, like, if he walked up to me, I'd slap him in the face no matter what. You know, like, I'm sorry. Those monkeys had a chance. So,
yeah. No, I think that's good that we have evidence for your future trial. But I think more importantly, it is true that, like, because there's not that mystery, like, Damien rarely ever acts like a normal kid. And that was something that was more of a thing in part 4, where they're all worried that Delia isn't making friends like that. This is weird outcast. Whereas in part 1, he's still kind of hanging out with kids and it's fine. You just don't see it that much. So you're just assuming it's all fine. But he's a little weirdo and he's constantly staring and scowling at stuff.
Even his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like, how can that kid make a PB&J late at night and not have a smile on his face?
Yeah.
I do that.
I mean, like, like, he was busted, but his mom's like, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I do love that even watching that minimal of an action made his mom just be like, yeah, this kid's messed up.
Well, we put the peanut butter on first. You put the jelly on first.
You put the jelly on top of the peanut butter and then a dry bread. That's not right.
That's not. It's disgusting.
It goes on one slab or the other. That's it.
I failed as a parent. I get I deserve what's coming to me.
Right.
But that, so it makes it less interesting because again, there's no mystery. So you're just sort of like, all right, so is he going to start like whiling out here? And then like it gets some of the stuff that's ambiguous in the first one is more just like confusing here because later when he's with the nanny, who we have not talked about yet, the nanny Ms. Baylock in this one.
Okay, yes,
is played by Mia Farrow in Rosemary from Rosemary's Baby and a bit of stunt casting. They're making, I get that reference, and she's fine, but again, she's a lot more pushed back than the kind of like doesn't have the wild eyes that the original had.
So I might have known that this casting was a thing beforehand, but it just went out of my brain. Lots of movie trivia in my head over the years.
Sure.
And like I've said before, like I try not to look things up before we watch a movie because I want to be surprised and all that kind of stuff. When Mia Farrow walked in as Baylock, I was like, I'm on board with this. This is total stunt casting, but this is funny. Like this is good. And Mia Farrow's great.
Yeah.
She's a great actress. Like she will bring something to this. She brought evil. Like there was no nuance to this whatsoever, which is, the problem with the whole movie. But
she's a lot more like just sweet the whole way through, even while doing some of the most evil stuff, where Billy Whitelock had that more crazed fuck you edge to her performance. That scene really got to me instead of when Catherine Thorne is all laid up after the balcony drop, which before we get to that, the balcony drop was weirder in this one because instead of in the scene before, it's Baylock like feeding Damien strawberries, and it seems like they're just communicating psychically. Right. And then they both look ominously over at this Razor scooter that he rides instead of a tricycle. So then it's like, well, okay, so what's happening there? Is she suggesting that to him? Is he controlling her? In a way that, again, wasn't like, ooh, mysterious and ambiguous. It was more just like, wait, what's happening? But then he goes around that balcony. He doesn't just pop out of a doorway and hits her. Like he takes some turns. It's like you saw him coming.
There's some intent. Man, don't you hear that?
Yeah, exactly. Like
I'm not going to judge her parenting skills because who am I to do that? But like you hear a scooter like that.
You know what's going on, and you know he can't be trusted.
But on the other hand, maybe she's just like, yeah, he's just scooting around. Who gives a shit? Like he's not going to run into me. Kid. Yeah, there is that. So okay, I apologize. That's what I think now.
I apologize to Julia Stiles for your fake parenting. Right. So the fall, they try to do the same kind of. She falls a lot further. She falls like 2 stories instead of like one, really.
Yes.
And they try to do the same thing, but it's like it's so less dreamy or hyper real.
There was that weird angle that was lacking.
It just looks like a goofy effect versus like you could tell it's an effect, but it's something weird about it. So it just, if you knew what they were trying to go for, you're like, oh, okay. But otherwise, it was just, I don't know, didn't do much.
Right.
But so she's laid up in the hospital, and then instead of having like Baylock just sort of appear and throw out the window, like she is infirm. She can't move. She's pretty doped up. And Baylock, to dispatch her this time, talks her way in, makes Damien wait outside, just punctures her IV bag with a syringe and just blows a bubble in there. And that's what kills her. Just a bubble in your bloodstream gets to the brain. That is terrifying to me.
Right.
That is one of those, like, that could just be happening at any moment in my body. I have no idea.
And that's one of those, like, I always wonder, can that actually happen?
Look, I'm not going to look it up. I just want to be scared to death of it.
Right. But in this scene, like, obviously there's no, kind of psychic eyeball fight between the two of them, like in the first one. So there's less, Julia Stiles has less to do here. I do think that her kind of struggling was like scary, like Baylock's like hand over her mouth. That was scary. Like that was uncomfortable.
Because Baylock is still just like sweet as hell the whole time. Right. I mean, she's not like, it's awful.
But then you've got Damien outside, like mesmerizing a cop. So he's definitely culpable in all of this. So we've, again, not that it hasn't happened before, but we've removed any mystery that this little boy is evil.
Yeah.
And he's just like, you know what? Fuck it. We're just like, I'm distracting a cop while you kill my mom.
But then because you go, I mean, I know this is a little bit later in the game, but like, because you kind of get the sense that he's evil, when they're away from him for a long time, it makes you wonder what's going on. Like, well, what's he up to? What kind of evil nonsense is he up to, rather than being like, well, we don't know if he's evil yet. So right now he seems okay. There's some weird stuff going on, but we're okay getting away from this. And I had a little bit more of a thought of like, well, I wonder what Damien's doing this time. Not out of any desire to see that kid more. Nothing against Seamus Davey Fitzpatrick, who played Damien, but
he was just playing video games.
Yeah, basically playing that one
with
really annoying
goofy sound effects instead of riding a trike.
That is one of my biggest pet peeves in movies. Is when a guy has like, like a plate, like an Xbox controller.
Like a PS1.
And it's like playing Atari sounds. It's like, sure, why not?
Whatever.
That moment of watching that little bubble go down, particularly for how like ridiculous so many other deaths are.
Sure.
I thought was a good way to do it. I thought that was
well done.
Neat.
Yeah. And this is not the kid's problem. This is direction. He was just like too scary the entire time. And it didn't work.
Well, like, again, like going back to the church approach, just attacking mom and being furious at his mother when it's over. Like he's sitting there just seething, staring at her. And so it does create much more of a dynamic, like a volatile dynamic between them. But it's also like, this kid's evil. Rather than being like, he's just acting up and I don't know what's going on.
Right.
Which could work, but didn't in this movie.
David Thewlis, I always like it when he shows up, but I'm honestly not sure what I like him from because I'm not a Harry Potter fan, which is good for him because I'm just like, I don't even know what I like you from, but you're charming. So like, he's a good follow-up for David Warner. Like if anybody were to take that part, great. Yeah. Again, lack of neckerchiefs.
Right.
Problem.
Also,
But-
his dark room was making me mad because there's windows everywhere. Like, what are you doing?
Right. Yeah.
But
I liked him.
Stylish. No, he was great, and I like the moment when he's describing the poem. Which, first of all, they make sure to underline, like, oh, this is a composite of several different prophecies. It's like, so it's something someone made up. Then you know what I mean? Like, it's
Right.
It was,
Right,
it just
right.
it kind of diluted when the first one made it sound like it was more from the Bible. But when he goes like, okay, bear with me, it's politics. You know, the C is politics. I like to start it with bear with me. Like, I guess this is jump, but I know. And
Well,
like,
and
okay.
he even said that at the coffee stand off of the side of the road, just like the first movie. I'm like, Jesus Christ, guys!
I
Like,
love that coffee stand too. That was
It's out in the middle of nowhere.
It was out in the middle of nowhere. It's also like it was an interesting choice to make it all be in winter.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm not like knocking it or saying one way or the other. It was just like I was not expecting that, and so of course the guy, it gave them a chance to be more blue.
Right.
But when they go to the monastery to find the burnt priest, which I thought, like, taking it
I got
out
thoughts
of,
on this one.
Well, taking it out of like the hospital with the coolest elevators ever and having them talk to just like a nun who's selling trinkets at the side of the road about the fire.
Yeah.
Felt so much less of like, again, like a real place and real people having these conversations. It was, everything has this foreboding air to it. Gets a little, like, that's hard to sustain.
Right.
Not just because we know what's going to happen, but just, I think just in general, it's hard to sustain. But I did like their approach to that, like how it's like Silent Hill, everything's foggy.
Sure.
And they're rowing a boat to retirement community at Castlevania to meet Darth Sidious. It was fine.
Yeah, I mean, oh man. Okay, so really disliked a lot of this bit only because I've seen the first one. And I think about that a lot, which is, would I like this movie as a remake, or like, would I like this movie as an original if I hadn't seen the original? Like, what I didn't like about this is I really disliked how they portrayed the pastor who they were going there to see, because he had such like I have a makeup effect on me, and I look like Palpatine.
Yeah.
As you already said.
Yeah. Well, I said
This is
Sidious, so technically it's different.
Yeah. But
Let's get Stuart on the phone.
what I didn't like about it is there's something about the original scene where these people look so removed from civilization. They look so out there. They look like they do actually study old texts, and like they believe in, for lack of a better word, even though they are Christian, like folk horror.
Right.
You know, like that kind of thing. Whereas, and there's something so unsettling to that low budget look of the first Omen, which in this one, I'm just
Very run down.
yeah, there's something about it. And in this one, I just thought that, like, okay, the blue light's dumb. The snow is kind of cool. The makeup effects, I didn't buy at all. The eyeball and the black hood. He looked, okay, so I guess this is what it is. We had to talk this through. This guy looked evil, whereas the guy in the previous film looked like he was actually like a screwed up guy who was out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, like, it looks like he was punished and the result of that punishment. Not like he was, because
sure.
this guy just was like, bah, look at my face. Bah.
Yeah.
Whereas this guy was like, I can't really move and my face is scarred. And this is sort of like, I'm trapped in this body, so to speak. Well, this is more just like, yeah, I'm here. What? I'm burned. Yeah, this sucks. Give me that pen. Ugh.
Look at my eye.
Yeah, and I like the makeup effect again. Like, comparing it to the original, on its own, the makeup effect is fine. Like, whatever. I just think going over the top with it and making the place they're going to seem like less of a, we just tucked this guy away somewhere.
Right.
Versus like, no, this is a really cool, he's in Neuschwanstein or like some fancy ass castle, basically. It's all
He's
fine.
like in a place where I want to go and like watch a metal show.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Not some sort of like weird ass place that's, again, tucked away.
Yeah, I
and
mean, like,
we
yes,
don't want to forget about
it's
these people.
isolated, but it seems more like a fairy tale castle. It's just not. It's not. It doesn't have the same
too
feel.
produced.
Yeah, yes, too produced is how I feel about a lot of this movie. And it's not like it was a tiny budget indie thriller beforehand, but like, yeah, this is just. It feels so glossy and in a way that I think detracts from the whole thing.
Yeah.
But yes, and then the scene. I also thought it was kind of interesting. The scene in the cemetery, the following scene, Liev Schreiber was great in that scene. Again, like not getting as big, but sort of internally crumbling. I liked him in that. But then when the dogs come, of course it's more of we're gonna fight them because that's what you do in 2006.
Right.
David Tennant pulling out like a cross to swat one of them with or whatever.
David
I like
Tennant,
the fight where they're just like running away.
I'm not that big of a nerd, but David Tennant, David Thewlis.
Oh, sorry, David Thewlis. Yeah, one of them. Oh God, David. I like David Tennant, but David Tennant in this role would have been
Alex
weird.
is gonna have a fit.
He is. He's so. I don't think he's allowed to listen to the show. But yeah, I just liked it better that they're like, we're just regular dudes. We can't fight dogs. Let's get out of here.
I mean, okay, if you and I were stuck in a cemetery digging up your
I would fight dogs because I'm super tough and powerful.
I would be running.
And the whole time I'd be doing push-ups. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be running for the gates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Immediately. I would also be just saying, like, I know you're attacking me, cute dog, but you're still cute and I don't want to touch you.
Look at his face. Oh, look at you tear off my throat.
I mean, that was another thing. The first hypno dog in this movie was a real cute dog with like big black furry hair and everything. And then they switched.
Yeah, it was a little bit like the dog from was the dog in the Pet Sematary remake black? I can't remember.
I think so.
It's a lot more like wolfish looking dog, but it's all black. So I was thinking of like, I don't know. Like, I thought that was an interesting change because I like the look of a Rottweiler, like as far as like an evil dog goes.
Sure.
And I'm overthinking this. There's a little bit later when he goes to meet Pete Postlethwaite as the priest.
Love that guy. Again, I don't know where I know him from, but I love that guy.
Oh, what do you got? You got your Usual Suspects, Name of the Father, tons of good stuff. But other movies, there's a bit in the back where someone in a red raincoat runs in the background. And I'm like, is that supposed to be a reference to Don't Look Now? Is this like trying to be this cheeky, like, look, I know other horror movies? Because it was very weird because it's this very like prominent red figure in the background. I thought maybe it was going to play into something later. It doesn't.
I took it as Schindler's List.
I mean, same sort of deal where it's like this nod to something else. Whereas I was thinking about that. Is this supposed to be like a nod to the dog from Stalker? Maybe it's just because I just watched that.
Oh,
like it's this sort of like just all black dog that kind of looks like a wolf. Why the change? You know what I mean? Because when you make a change like that, you're like, okay, well, why did you do that?
Right.
And I couldn't come up with anything.
Right.
So
aesthetic,
no idea.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just like, well, I don't like Rottweilers. Rottweilers are played out.
Played out. There you go. So what about the kills in this? So we got to start with the David Thewlis skill, just to make sure that we don't forget.
Oh, the future kick?
Yeah.
Cannot recommend the movie Future Kick enough.
Watch the movie Future Kick.
Really.
Yeah.
It's a Don the Dragon Wilson, Meg Foster movie and has a very similar kill that is pretty magnificent.
Right. So when you're the director of this film, do you set it up and you're like, well, we got to do, I mean, everything else is shot for shot. Do we do one of the most iconic death scenes from the 70s over, or do we do it our own way? I mean, it's kind of the point of this podcast. Like, do you do it again or do you do it your own way?
Yeah.
I think this just falls in that camp of, if I hadn't seen the original, I would think that this was pretty fun.
Yes.
Like, it was well done. It was like shocking and quick.
Surprisingly bloody.
But yeah, surprisingly bloody. But each Omen movie has a surprisingly bloody kill, like one of them.
Yeah.
And so this was it. Did we need 6 different camera angles? I guess only if you're David Warner, not if you're David Thewlis.
Not if you're David Thewlis. But like the body fall afterwards was pretty great too. Yeah. They call him one camera Thewlis.
Right.
Yeah, that one was pretty extreme. Like I said, the change for the Julia Stiles death was intense. Like much quieter than all the other deaths in there.
Father Brennan,
that's his name. The Father Brennan death. Oh my God. The Father Brennan death is ridiculous.
I kind of like this one.
Yes.
Like, I was into this change. Now, I love this death in the original one. I like how janky it looks. I love that they literally just sent a spike down a piece of fishing wire. Like, that makes my low budget horror heart sing. But if you're going to up the game on this, you have him as the actor.
Yeah.
Like, he's great. You add stained glass windows falling into his face. pretty great. I dug it.
And absolutely 100%, I will give John more credit for keeping that shot is in the newspaper.
Okay. So I was annoyed with it because the first time we saw that shot, I believe, is in David Thewlis's like dark room. He's showing him like the photos. Mm-hmm. But then it shows up a couple of beats later, and it was in the newspaper, and that got a fist pump out of me. I was just like, okay, we went, and it was like, you know, the New York Post of London or whatever, still like a tabloid like newspaper. But I was so glad that they kept that.
Stupid thing. And like I was already just cracking up because I'm always a fan of like movie interfaces. I'm not I'm not a UI engineer. I don't know user interface, but just like when it's like, oh, a big button shows up in the middle of your screen that says email. Sure, why not? And then like it just opens. It's that stuff's always fun to me. Like again, like how like Young and the Restless. Talking on the rest again. I think it's like their YouTube is like UView or something like that. Like the way they get around this, I'm always a fan of that, of like weird computer stuff like that. But but I really like Pete Postlewaite as Father Brennan. Like his insanity is a lot quieter. It's a lot just more that like quiet intensity where it's like, you got to get you got to take communion right now. Oh my God. Yeah. Rather than the more like the fire and brimstone of Patrick Troughton's performance. And so, but he still like, does a terrible job of selling it, but it's more reserved in his insanity, but still very intense. And I didn't like, I will say though, that with Troughton's performance is that when they meet again and he like looks sick and in pain. Yeah. And when you find out he's dying, it's like, oh, that makes more sense. Whereas Pete Postlewaite, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm dying. Right. Like, oh, okay. Well, that's fine.
Talking about the dream sequences, I felt like there was somewhere to go here, but they didn't go far enough. You put somebody in a goat skull mask with a robe over them, and I'm gonna kind of like it. Like, I know that's corny as hell, but I dig it. You know, it's almost like they didn't play the rule of threes. Like they did it twice, and they didn't do it a third bigger time to make it feel that it actually had weight or had a meaning to it. I'm not saying that like they needed to encounter somebody in a red robe with a goat's mask on, but that might have gone a little bit further to just kind of explain why these images were there, because the images were too basic to look that haunting, I guess.
And they felt like filler. In a lot of ways. It was just like a way to add jump scares or stuff like that. You know, I didn't need that to show that the Julia Stiles relationship with Damien was crumbling. I didn't like, oh, well, the dream let me know.
Damien holding a noose with vampire teeth
for some reason. Yeah. And then when Liev Schreiber is having his freak out, his dream about it, and there's like the priest behind the columns who just like whips out a dead baby. It's like very rubbery looking. Sure. It was just like, okay, I can see why you cut away from that. But some of that stuff just felt very, wouldn't this look cool? You know?
That was most of it.
Which can be fine, but just didn't really do much. Yeah.
It's almost like they didn't push that far enough to make it feel like it was relevant to the movie.
Or really like set a mood. It really just felt like, hey, look at these cool shots. Okay, back to the movie.
Right. Much like Psycho remake. So why do we think that the Psycho remake was an interesting dance with the original, and this one just felt, because I want to be careful about just trashing remakes, because I want to believe that there could be something to be seen here. My main rule is just like, hey, why don't you make remake a movie that's didn't quite fire on all cylinders instead of a classic?
Yeah, remake Omen too.
Why did we find that one interesting and not this one?
I think, as I said in the open, that it is like this sort of lays bare what Donner did in terms of choosing to make it more of a mystery and how that works better. Now, granted, like I said, you can't help. It's hard to take this movie on its face value without comparing it to the original. Yeah. Whereas like Van Sant was challenging you was like, look at this. Look at how he did the exact same fucking thing.
Like literally the exact same shots.
Yes. Yeah. Like I read an excerpt from an interview with him recently where someone asked him why he did it. And he was like, to see what would happen.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that answer.
Well, again, my favorite of his responses has always been, why'd you make it? So no one else would have to.
Yeah.
Like, I love that glib.
This feels like this feels more cynical than Van Sant. Like, I think when I was younger and heard about the Shop Shop remake, I was a lot more like, well, this is just like the most cynical cash in. And yes, but also that's kind of the point. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of readings there where this just feels like, no, it is. And as we said, it's just like, because it doesn't do anything new and different with it. It just glosses it all up. And that doesn't feel that interesting to me.
And I guess, like, even though I love Gregory Peck, he's no Norman Bates. And so switching up a performance like Vince Vaughn did for Norman Bates is not as interesting to watch.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I was more interested in watching what Vince Vaughn was doing with Anthony Perkins' performance than I was Liev Schreiber to Gregory Peck.
Well, and I think that's a good view of it, like sort of overall, where it's like when you can watch that remake specifically with the second remake, specifically with the first one in mind, you're involved making those contrasts and thinking about that stuff and for good or ill, or like figuring out why this stuff works and why it doesn't, where this is not really meant to do that. Yeah. This is like, we're just updating it for a modern audience, not adding much to it. So you're not as engaged.
Obviously, that's what Gus Van Sant wanted to do, and it was a part of the press push for it. Like, I almost wonder if they would have pressed out into the press that this was going to be a shot-for-shot remake of The Omen. Like, if we would think differently of it, if like the narrative would have been differently, like if we would have like engaged in this,
or like they're like, we are using the original script, and I mean, and I didn't follow the press for it. Maybe it did, so I don't know.
There you go. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Again, like I don't want to like hate on every remake. Like, there can be something useful to this, and if somebody sees this one first and makes them go watch the 70s version, great.
Yeah, but I'd be willing to say though that outside of Psycho, for the films that we've watched, for the franchises that we've done, this might be my number 2 spot for remakes, because I didn't like it, but it's not a bad movie.
It's not a bad movie.
Because like I didn't, you know, by like Friday the 13th, I didn't particularly like. Silent Night, Deadly Night, that was, or you know, I really didn't like that one. I'm just trying to think of the other ones that were done. That Pet Sematary, really didn't like.
Really didn't like that one.
It's an okay standalone movie. It's just hard, like particularly watching them back to back to back like this. Certainly better than 4, you know, part 4. But it doesn't feel like it justifies its existence.
Right. It makes our format hard because, like, why would you watch the Omen 76 and then the Omen 2006 back to back and not feel like you've been just duped?
Right.
But
yeah.
But that's what we do. And now, granted, I've had many movie nights by myself or with other friends where we watch the original and the remake. You know, potentially one of the best ones was all the taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Oh, sure.
And good God, is there a drop off, because the original is one of the greatest movies ever made. So, but I'm just like, what is the point of this if it's not to get you to watch the old one? And if you're already a fan of the old one, then why watch this one? So, but again, it's not poorly made.
Yeah. You know, like at least again, like the Pet Sematary, for as much as I didn't really enjoy the Pet Sematary remake, it does try it. It does try something with it. It's like, all right, we're going to switch it and make it the daughter. Okay, we're going to switch it up and try to make it more bleak in this way or whatever. This is just like the same. I will say they do try at the end, and I don't think this is effective, but as you sort of referenced earlier, at the end after he gets shot, which trying to kill Damien, which is really much less dramatic than than the Gregory Peck moment, because like it's all these SWAT guys coming in. And it's like a random one takes the shot with the close with the gun or whatever. But instead of just going to the funeral, the funeral is intercut with this like cardinal going to talk to the dying pope, who like you've widened the scope away from the personal story into like what this can all mean. And like, that's true. Like, obviously, like the devil is involved. That's bad. But I think keeping it still small and being like, well, this guy failed and the devil's out now, and that lessened it. You know what I mean? Like, because you're not focused on him anymore. You're focused on this on like, oh, the pope's dying, so now we're really screwed. Right. So again, like you've done this shift of focus from what should be the intent of the scene. I think, also I think Damien at the end turning and looking was a little bit too like, ain't I a stinker? I
mean, of course it was going to happen.
Yeah, but I just think he had a lot more of like ain't I a stinker look on his face than the other one.
Right. He does smirk.
Yeah.
A little bit more. Yeah, I don't know. Let's just go ahead and honor our dead and get out of here on this one. Ambassador Stephen Haynes, played by Marshall Cupp, incinerated in a car crash. Nanny, played by Amy Huck, hypnotized by Satan to hang herself. Father Brennan, played by Pete Postlewaite, impaled with a metal rod. Kate Thorne, played by Julia Stiles, injected with air embolism. Keith Jennings, played by David Thewlis, decapitated by a sign. Mrs. Baylock, played by Mia Farrow, ran over by Robert with a car. Robert Thorne, played by Liv Schreiber, shot by a police officer with a sniper rifle. Unnamed Pope, played by Bahumil Svarik, died of old age. So again, I mean, not a bad movie. I can't imagine why you would watch it unless you were watching along with us, which you always should do. Mm-hmm. So I love the idea that I'm trying to like tell people not to watch something, even though like I love when people watch along to be completionists, just like us. But you know, can't say that this one offered a whole lot new.
No, like I kind of wish there was a better director. Like it makes you think like if there was a better director behind it with these performances, like you probably could have gotten something really, really cool out of this. Mm-hmm. But this guy was a lot more than being stylish and slick. It felt like than really paying attention to like the plot beats or whatever.
I almost wish there was more style. Like there was just a tad bit of style. Like he was like slick, but push that style maybe a little bit more.
Ridiculous, but it's, I think also just though for this movie, like staying in a more sort of family drama makes a little bit more sense. But I also just think that style like undermines some of the other stuff they're going for. Yeah. That same Castlevania monastery scene, and then the priest pulls out a machine gun from under his cloak. You'd be like, absolutely, that makes sense. Like that should happen here.
For sure.
But yeah, it's like, it's not bad, but it's bad for what it's trying to do. You know what I mean? Like it's, if you've seen the original, there's
I don't even know what it's trying to do, to be honest. I mean, I'm not trying to be overly cynical. I'm just trying to like, are we trying to draw people to the original? Because if so, like maybe you would do that, but
or like start a whole new, or start a new lore thing with it or something, you know, like do a spin on it. Didn't do any of that. So it made a ton of money though. It made grossed 120 million against a $25 million budget, according to Wikipedia.
There you go.
That ain't too shabby.
That ain't bad.
You know, which kind of funny that it's like, it's not until now that we have that new one coming out that they didn't like, it got mixed reviews, but it's still like, it made money.
Almost 20 years later. Yeah.
And it would have been, I, as I already said, like while I didn't love this one, I wouldn't mind seeing like, let's do the other ones. Let's see what we can do with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But they're not, they're going to the past. They're going to the pre-Omen, which like, is just going to be a lady having sex with a jackal? Like what am I going to be seeing there? So I don't know. Like
as much as I
don't have much hope for it.
As much as I enjoyed that part of the lore, can't say I want to see it.
Yeah, I'm not that interested.
Yeah, not that interested in seeing it on film. I always thought that was a funny bit.
Well, I think they left it up to your imagination a bit more in the original, which worked. This one, like the guy fucking says,
I was going to say that earlier. Like the first meeting of Brennan, he says it full on.
Yeah.
Mother was a jackal.
So like having it make you do the work.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit more horrifying. You're like, that can't be right. Why did I think of that? You know,
exactly.
Rather than just spelling it all out for you.
All right. Well, I think that's about going to do it for the Omen remake. Next week, we'll be back with our wrap up of all four, because that's still kind of fun to do, to talk about how all these definitely shift together. And then we haven't quite settled on what we're going to do next, but I do know that in sometime this summer, we're going to be taking a look at that Maniac Cop. So if you want to like get ahead on that, I would suggest doing that. We're trying to work out some scheduling things that would be fun to talk about Maniac Cop. So take a look at that, but I think there's going to be something in between.
Yeah. You can't rush right into Maniac Cop. You got to work your way up.
Yeah. It deserves that kind of love. But in the meantime, you can find us on Instagram at This May Hurt a Bit Pod, Hurt a Bit Pod on YouTube, and you can email us at thismayhurtabitpod@gmail.com. So stay tuned next week for our wrap up. We'll let you know where we're watching next, because as I said before, I love it when people watch along with us, and we'll let you know what we're going to dive into in a week.
Yeah, let us know what you thought of the remake. Obviously, Chumps Love Insta did not care for it. But if you're like, hey, this worked for me, let us know why. I'm always willing to entertain if you liked it, let me know why.
Please do let us know. I love hearing from people as far as like, again, even if they disagree with us, I love hearing that kind of stuff. So please do.
If it made you super excited, go ahead and let us know why. That's totally cool.
All for it. Yeah. All right. So we'll see you next week for the wrap up episode. So good night for now.
Good night.
This has been a Caretaker Press production. It was produced by James Strayer and edited by John C. Myers. Logo by Ethan Kimberling and music by Michael Arthur Holloway, who you can find on Bandcamp. Follow us on Instagram at thismayhurtabitpod and email us at thismayhurtabitpod@gmail.com. Give us a 5-star review over on your favorite podcast app, and we'll see you next time.